Hey screenwriters. "2020 marks the 15th anniversary of one of the most controversial and divisive books ever written for screenwriting. Since its first publication in 2005, Save the Cat has divided screenwriters about whether its formulaic approach to screenwriting helps you craft better stories or whether it's all just hype. In today's video, I discuss the legacy of Save the Cat and discuss whether or not it's still valid for screenwriters entering 2021. So, let's fade in. Blake Snyder's Save the Cat has been in publication since 2005. Since then, it has sold thousands of copies, gone into 34 reprints, and influenced an entire generation of screenwriters. If you haven't heard of Save the Cat, let me give you a brief overview of it, as well as the author, Blake Snyder. Blake Snyder is considered to be one of the most successful spec script writers in Hollywood history, having sold scripts to Disney and Steven Spielberg. And as a successful screenwriter, he did what many of them do. He wrote a book. Save the Cat pitched itself as the last screenwriting book you'll ever need. Save the Cat purports to show that all successful Hollywood movies have a common superstructure underneath them. Snyder argued that by understanding this superstructure, you can decipher it, understand what made successful screenplays successful, and then incorporate that knowledge into your screenplays. Arguably, up until this point, the most influential book on storytelling in Hollywood was The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell, a book that introduced Hollywood to the idea of the hero's journey. In that book, Campbell argues that there are common elements to world myths. Campbell defined a hero's journey as a series of events and stages that a hero has to go through for his journey to be complete. The hero's journey follows the following structure. First, the hero is seen in his normal world, in his normal life. Then there is a call to action to which the hero must accept. From there, the hero must leave his everyday life to answer the call to action. Somewhere along the way, the hero meets a mentor who will help him along his journey. Helped by their mentor, the hero will have to cross a dangerous and protected boundary that will lead him to a world unlike the normal world that he came from. From there, the hero will face tests and challenges that we'll have to overcome. Then, the hero will have to face a final challenge, one uniquely designed to exploit his greatest weakness. Once the hero defeats the final challenge, he can then claim his reward, transform himself, go back home, and then use his reward for the benefits of his community. Now, a lot of ink has been spilled discussing Joseph Campbell's influence on Hollywood and screenwriting in particular. Some of the greatest movies in Hollywood history have used Joseph Campbell's ideas and structures. Most famously, or infamously, is Star Wars. So what does all this have to do with Save the Cat? Well, just as Campbell argued that there are common structures to great myths, Snyder argues that there are common structures to great screenplays. Essentially, what Snyder is putting forward is a different take on Campbell's hero's journey. Except in Snyder's case, the structure is not so much about the journey, but about the storytelling itself. Snyder argues that we, as audiences, are hardwired for story structure. What makes Save the Cat unique is that Snyder just doesn't talk about the elements of what makes a great story. He discusses when those elements should happen in a story for a more satisfying storytelling experience. This is best described via Snyder's beat sheet. And for screenwriters, the beat sheet is either the secret recipe to writing a great screenplay or the algorithm that destroyed cinema. So let me get into the beat sheet so you understand what I'm talking about. At the heart of Save the Cat is the beat sheet. And the beat sheet can be thought about as half checklist and half recipe. It's the key story beats that Snyder believes exist in all of, if not most, of Hollywood's most successful scripts. The beat sheet has two main parts. The story beats, the actual story beats, the who, where, what, and how of your story, and when those story beats have to take place in your story, the page count, the when these events happen in the chronology of your story. Save the Cat argues that these story beats happen at specific moments in great screenplays. The beat sheet is composed of around 15 key story elements: the opening image, the theme, the setup, the catalyst, the debate, Act 2, B story, fun and games, midpoint, the bad guys close in, all is lost, dark night of the soul, Act 3, finale, and final image. Now, just looking at this beat sheet, you can see the parallels to Campbell's own work. The opening image, for example, is reminiscent of Campbell's normal world that the hero comes from. The bad guys close in is very similar to Campbell's challenges that the hero must face along his journey. The final image is often described as the opposite of the opening image, and it's very similar to how in Campbell's hero's journey, the hero returns home a changed person. However, unlike the hero with 1,000 faces, Snyder argues that these story beats, in order for them to be successful, should happen at certain times within your screenplay. For example, Snyder's The Debate, what Campbell would argue as the call to action, should happen between pages 12 to 25. The Dark Night of the Soul, what Campbell would argue would be the biggest challenge for your hero, should take place between pages 75 and 85. This superstructure, relating beats to page count, is what makes Save the Cat so unique in the world of screenwriting books. It's a way of looking at storytelling and the structure of storytelling that is highly unique to the art of screenplay writing. Snyder came up with his beat sheet by researching some of the most successful movies in Hollywood history. What makes Save the Cat so compelling is that Snyder provides a lot of examples as to why he believes his thesis is correct. The book that I have here, Save the Cat Goes to the Movies, is the sequel to the original Save the Cat book, and this book is filled with examples of beat sheet breakdowns of some of the most popular, famous, award-winning movies in Hollywood history. In this book, you can see beat sheet breakdowns for some of the most famous movies in Hollywood, such as Aliens, Lethal Weapon, 28 Days, Saving Private Ryan, and a lot more. He shows you in detail how those screenplays follow his beat sheet method. But has Save the Cat made screenwriting easier, or has it made screenwriting too formulaic? I said in the beginning that this book is very controversial in the world of screenwriting. For a lot of screenwriters, the idea of there being a formula to writing a screenplay can seem very limiting or very oppressive. Many screenwriters can argue that it saps the creativity out of screenwriting if there is some sort of algorithm that you have to follow to write a great screenplay. And I have to admit, it's hard not to look at movies today and get a sense that you've seen it all before, or that the story structures are very, very familiar. There's an argument to be made that this kind of storytelling structure sort of takes the fun out of movies if you can predict to the minute when certain events are going to happen on screen. And if you're a new screenwriter, the idea of this kind of formula can seem very limiting. Maybe you have a story that doesn't fit this kind of formula. Maybe your idea doesn't fit into the traditional Hollywood way of telling a story. The other problem with Save the Cat is the potentially sexist underpinning of the structure itself. Let me explain. Because Save the Cat is ultimately based on the works of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, that means that the structure itself is defined by the journey of a male hero. The problem is that a hero's journey and a heroine's journey often take radically different paths. So perhaps the beat sheet structure by Snyder simply perpetuates a sexist way of telling stories, one that isn't inclusive of female heroes or non-binary heroes. So, what do I think of Save the Cat at 15? Now, I have a very different connection to this book than most of you probably do. I've mentioned in the past that my day job, I'm a marketing executive. That means that companies and businesses hire me to provide them with marketing and branding suggestions and solutions. Often what these companies ask for is what's called a case study. A case study is just a business term for an example. They want to feel comfortable knowing that the suggestions I'm making to them has found success with other companies. I still use the Save the Cat structure because I believe in case studies. What Snyder has essentially done is prove, in my opinion, that the most famous, the most successful Hollywood movies ever made follows a very similar story structure. And to me, that's all the proof that I need to adopt this kind of theory, because at the end of the day, I want my work to be successful. We have to understand that screenwriting is a business first and an art second. Studios are very risk averse. They don't want to spend millions of dollars developing something if they feel uncomfortable that it may not work. When I use the beat sheet method to outline my stories and to write my scripts, it makes me confident that a Hollywood reader or a studio or a producer, when reading that screenplay, will recognize and feel comfortable and familiar with the script structure that I'm laying out for them. They will recognize that structure and feel comfortable that I'm trying to tell a story in a manner that they're accustomed to. I still outline all of my screenplays using the beat sheet method, using the Save the Cat method. The first thing I do is I print out the beat sheet and I start outlining from there. It helps me simplify my outlining method. It helps me create a first draft faster and better than if I had not used a beat sheet method. So, would I recommend Save the Cat to screenwriters today? Absolutely, I would. This book is invaluable to new screenwriters that are still trying to understand story structure and script structure. Snyder's beat sheet method is still the simplest structure to follow to produce a professionally structured Hollywood script. Now, to be clear, this book doesn't tell you how to write a screenplay. It doesn't go into things like character development or thematic exploration or dialogue writing. But what it does do is give you a clear roadmap in terms of how to structure your story, where the major beats should happen, when they should happen, and why they should happen. So if this is the structure that Hollywood decided that it is most comfortable with, if this is the structure that audiences seem to relate to more and seem to have the greatest amount of emotional attachment to, if, like Campbell argued, that there is a greater metastructure to great stories, then it just seems kind of stupid to fight against this. To me, it's a no-brainer. I follow the beat sheet method because, quite frankly, it seems to be the most successful storytelling structure in Hollywood history. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't bend or break some of the rules that Snyder lays out. This doesn't mean that you can't adapt the beat sheet structure so that it can fit, for example, a heroine's journey or a non-binary character or a very different story that you're trying to tell. But it does mean that if you ignore the structure entirely, if you try and write a screenplay with a fundamentally different 3-act structure than the one that Snyder lays out, that it will be harder for you to sell that script and that your screenwriting career will take longer to take off. So, is Save the Cat still relevant? I would argue yes, it is. And I would argue if you're a new screenwriter, if you've never written a full-length feature script before, if you're struggling with your structure of your story, to this day, I still think that Save the Cat is the best screenwriting book to understand Hollywood story structure. I'm going to have links at the bottom of this video where you can get the original Save the Cat as well as its sequel, Save the Cat Goes to the Movies. Unfortunately, Blake Snyder is no longer with us. He passed away in 2009. But his work and the impact that he's going to have on storytelling and on Hollywood is going to be with us for generations to come. That's my video. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, drop them in the box below. If you've used Save the Cat for your screenwriting work, I'd love to hear about your experiences with it. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Happy writing.